are you ready for today's book? Today we are going to read a nonfiction book called Growing Trees. It's not a storybook. It tells us information about trees. It's written by Judith Bauer Stamper and illustrated by Wesley Lowe. Look at this tree. Do you think it's an old tree or a young tree? How do you know? Right, it's not too much bigger than the girl in the picture. Growing trees. This is a picture of my tree and me. We've been growing up together for a whole year. Look at our tree. What are these on the side? We might learn about that, won't we? It all began last summer. I went to visit a national forest with my mom and dad. A forest is a great place to learn about trees. There are trees as far as you can see. This is called a forest. We took a hike with a forester. A forester is someone who knows a lot about the forest. An expert on taking care of trees in the wild. The forester showed us small, young trees and big old trees that were like towering giants. See, the small ones are smaller than the people, and the big ones are way bigger than the people. Then he explained the life cycle of a tree. It all starts out with a seed. In the spring, the warm sun makes the seed germinate or begin to grow. The seed sprouts small roots that grow down into the ground. The root absorbs water and minerals from the soil. Minerals are like the food for the plant. It's in the ground and it pulls it up. Next, a small stem pushes out of the ground and grows 2 tiny seed leaves. The leaves use sunlight to give the tree energy to grow. A new growth, called a shoot, appears at the tip of the stem. Larger leaves grow from the shoot. The seedling is on its way to becoming a tree. Once these big leaves come, the seed leaves will die away. Now let's look at the picture. The illustrator drew the picture, but wanted us to see what each of the parts were called. So they made this line and wrote the word roots. This one says stem. This says shoot. And this one said leaves. That's called labeling a picture. So if you ever make a picture and you're not sure if people will know what it is, you can label it. You can write words on there. The young tree keeps growing if it gets enough water and sunlight to survive. In its next year of life, the tree grows buds that may turn into leaves. Soon the tree has branches, a woody trunk, bark, and lots of leaves. And there it's labeled again. Trunk, bark, branches, and leaves. Each year the tree grows taller and its trunk gets wider. A forester can tell how old a tree is by counting its rings. A tree trunk has 1 ring for each year it has been alive. This tree was more than 100 years old. Look at all those rings around that tree. Crazy. A forester can also find out how old a living tree is by using a tree borer, a tool that takes out a small part of the tree without hurting it. Looks kind of like a big needle, but it goes into the tree and they turn it and pull out a piece of the tree, and then they can count the lines. Now this won't hurt a tree, it'll just make a hole. Kind of like when you get a needle in your arm, you get a little hole and it hurts, but then you heal, the tree will heal. I want to show you before we go there that I also have some pieces of a tree. This one broke because it got super old, but look at that. Look at all the rings around this one. So many, I can't even count them. Now I have a younger tree right here. See? It's interesting because the middle is here The rings are bigger on that side. Interesting tree. After our trip to the forest, I wanted to grow a tree of my own. Dad took me to a nursery. A nursery? Isn't a nursery where a baby sleeps? Yes, it is. But a nursery is also a place where they grow and take care of plants and trees. It says, Dad took me to a nursery where you can buy flowers, shrubs, and trees. That's where they grow and where they sell them. So if you ever want to buy a plant or a tree or a bush, you go to the nursery. A nursery has trees that have grown big enough to transplant or plant in a new place. So if it's big enough, you can move it and take it somewhere and plant it. If it's too big, it'll be too heavy to move. And if it's too small, it might die because it still needs to be cared for. The nursery worker showed me trees that have flowers in the spring and fruit in the summer. We looked at trees with soft leaves and trees with pine needles. I chose a maple tree. My tree was already more than 4 feet high, just a little taller than me. See, just a little bit. There's the tag. It says what kind of tree it is and how much it's going to cost. And what's this down here? That's the root ball. The roots of the tree are inside of this burlap sack. That way they don't get broken when she brings it to her house. They keep it tied up until they get it safely home. The nursery worker helped us choose a shovel to plant the tree. She recommended organic fertilizer to feed the tree as it grew. Then she went over the instructions on how to plant my tree. You have to follow directions. That way it grows well when you take it home. I picked out a place in our backyard where the tree would have lots of sunlight and lots of room to grow. Then Dad and I dug a hole with the shovel. The hole was as deep as the tree's root ball and about 3 times as wide. There's the hole. We carefully lowered the tree into the hole. We loosened the burlap bag around the roots. This way, the roots don't get strangled. They can grow out of the bag. Next, we filled in soil around the tree. I added organic fertilizer to the soil and sprinkled mulch on top. Then I gave my tree a nice drink of water. What's this person doing? Yep, trimming the branches. Dad asked an arborist to check out the other trees in our yard. An arborist is like a doctor for trees. She pruned the branches of our big trees with pruning shears. There she is. Those are the pruning shears. Pruning means you're taking off a little bit so they're not so big. We read another story when an arborist came and helped a tree that was sick. Anybody remember? Right, our tree named Steve. It got sick, and the arborist came and took care of it. What's the arborist doing here? Looks like she's checking for a heartbeat. Do trees have heartbeats? No. Maybe it's checking to see if it's breathing. No, trees don't breathe like that. Silly. What is she doing, I wonder? How will we find out? Right, we got to read the words. She checked all the trees for signs of disease and also listened for bugs by using a stethoscope. She looked like a doctor. So she's listening for bugs inside. Why is that important? If there's bugs inside and they're not good for trees, they could hurt the trees. So she would have to check and see if they're in there. Otherwise, she has to get them out or the tree could die. One of our oldest trees had been damaged in a storm. The arborist used a handsaw and a chainsaw to cut off 2 broken limbs. I asked the arborist to check my tree. She said it was doing just fine. She added a stake to help it grow up straight. That's what these are. These are called stakes. Not steak like you eat a steak, but a stake as in a pointy stick. She put this in the ground and this in the ground and then tied the tree to it. This is to make sure that the tree grows straight up instead of bends over, because right now the tree trunk is very skinny and weak. When the weather turned cold, my tree's green leaves turned bright red. Then they twirled down to the ground. Is that a bad thing? No. This is a deciduous tree, and deciduous trees have leaves that change color in the fall and fall down. So this tree will not have any leaves on it when winter comes. The next spring, my tree grew buds that turned into leaves. There's the little buds. See? Teeny tiny buds. Over the summer, it grew branches with more leaves. Its trunk grew thicker. Here it says, close-up of red maple branch with buds on in the spring. Those will open up to be leaves. This is a leaf from my red maple tree. It has 3 lobes, 1, 2, 3, that have saw-toothed edges. Saw-tooth means jiggy-jag, jig, 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 jig. This is the stem. The label tells me stem, and this label tells me this is the lobe. The bark is dark gray and rough with little ridges. Bark, ridges. Ridges are bumpy and rough, not smooth. My tree, that is bumpy with ridges. It is a rough bark. All summer, I watered my tree and checked it for insects. It just kept growing. The arborist said that my tree could grow 60 feet high. That's taller than my house. Look at my tree now. It's much taller than I am. If I take good care of it, it will be around for a long, long time. A tree is a great friend to grow up with. You can plant a tree too. Which tree would you choose if you could plant a tree? Let's take a look. Oak tree, palm tree, pine tree, weeping willow. The branches go down. Japanese maple, and a sweet cherry. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 trees here. Which of these would you choose to plant? Not all of these trees might grow very well here. Palm trees usually need a very hot place to grow. And there you go, growing trees. Thanks for reading with me, friends. Bye now.